different doors.
So I was talking to grandmother Tony, so they had grandmother who it was. She goes, I thought he was one of my relatives.
They're all on balance. I don't think that was the case, just open any doors back there.
Sounds good to me, kiddo. Leave no evidence.
That's right.
Once upon a time. Genesis 39. Heavenly Father, we ask that you want us today, your Holy Spirit be upon us, read your word, study your word, understand, and see how it applies in our lives, just how the message is written in your word, and how we can interpret it. We ask this thing in Jesus' name. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. So, passed down to Potiphar. His brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites, they sold him to the Egyptians. I'm sure there was he probably worked on them. So the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did. But there's an absence of that. As Potiphar saw that Joseph, the slave he had just purchased, was a terrific value. For this slave was very good in business, and as the old saying has, the Midas touch. So he can see from this passage that Potiphar wasn't a foolish man. Whatever God he worshipped, he felt that this Joseph's God was with him, and that benefited him. So, I mean, bought a slave, he probably figured, I'll have him do some work around the stuff. And he saw that he was so good at what he did, and he motivated others to do work. And hey, this guy can do my job. I don't have to do it. A lot of people out there today, when they find somebody that can do that, run their business for them, and keep an eye out what they're doing, but they sit back and just bring in the money. So that's why how many times when we see in the movies or maybe in real life when the boss recognizes how great a worker he has in his company, that they utilize them to be the best benefit for them that they can. And I see this just with Potiphar did. So Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household. He entrusted into his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptians because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything that Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except what he ate. So, like I said, Potiphar saw the good thing. He didn't probably recognize Joseph's God. Right? Being Egyptian, he probably had a great number of gods to worry about himself. But here, and Joseph, read on here when he talks, he doesn't take any credit upon himself. And at no point he says, I can't do anything. At one point he says, I can't do anything, but God can do everything. And he will tell you what you require. Now it says, now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. It appears that Potiphar's wife was drawn to power, and she saw how attractive to Joseph her husband was, and this drew her to him also. Maybe she thought Joseph was going to be someone of great importance like her. She wanted to be part of it.
Maybe she was just born.
She was a cougar. But it doesn't tell you what Potiphar looks like. He was after Potiphar. That's why I said it. I mean, she had all those servants there. And why did she give up her Joseph?
She had slept with all of them already.
Yeah, maybe.
Wasn't very nice.
To say the least.
It says, doesn't tell you what Potiphar looks like, but it does tell you what Joseph looks like, and then perhaps Potiphar's wife, referred to as a cougar, was a middle-aged woman that tries to relieve her youth by the attraction of younger men. But he refused. He says, with me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. And no one is greater than this house than I am. Some people consider that as a bragging thing, even though it's the truth. It's how your delivery is. He says, my master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. And how could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? He didn't say anything about his master. No point does he say, how can I do this wicked thing and sin against my master? You know, but he does say, sin against God. Something more important to him than Potiphar. And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties. None of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand, she ran out of the house. She called her house servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. And when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him the story. That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. Here we see the master's wife had was turned down after what described as numerous attempts using her. And she used her hurt in a way to get even. Okay, and she turned her story. How many times she rehearsed it before she told it, I don't know. But she told it to the servants. She had no reason to tell it to the servants. She wanted an audience. She needed somebody to back her. She plots out her revenge with the rest of the help, and then plots her story to her husband before her story can be thwarted by perhaps letting her husband talk to Joseph first. So I wrote, he writes today's start by a lie told to others without rebuttal from anyone. Soon becomes a fuel for outrage, and when the group of people who believe the lie is the truth, without substantiating information, rampage on. Soon no one will want to hear the truth or care. The person who started the whole thing can usually sit back and watch the results of their handiwork. Potiphar's wife did just this, and Joseph was thrown into prison. So she couldn't have him, so nobody could have him. She did what she had to make sure he was thrown in prison.
You know, it's interesting, it says in front of anger, but how happy was he? He had every legal right to execute Joseph, okay, of the Egyptian law. He really put him in prison. I wonder if he.
I don't know if he was angry at Joseph for himself.
He knew he married a friend.
I'm wondering if he just had a seed of suspicion in him. Okay?
Did
He
he
shot
have
for business trips, and
I'm just saying, he gave Joseph control of his entire house and his bills. When he's gone, the first thing he does is, how could I have trusted this, but foolish enough to trust somebody, And he believed his wife over everything, but he had no reason other to.
ancient politics, don't get me wrong, in Egypt, women were very important, especially in Egypt, more so than other nations. And he made marriage power. If that was the case, he doesn't want to take her option, no matter what she was.
Yeah.
Okay? He could lose his position, he could lose his life. I don't know. I've often wondered, who is he the angriest at? Himself, his wife, or Joseph?
I wouldn't think it'd be Joseph or to kill him.
He had every legal right to execute her.
Yeah, he just threw him in prison.
You know,
probably figured that was the easiest of what he could do. You know, his wife would probably, would have probably stopped him from being beheaded. You know, because, I mean, even in prison, she could probably go to the prison and try and get him. But it doesn't show that it said that she does.
Well, that would have gave away her life. She would have went to the prison to see him.
He's gonna rap, like the woman's skirt or something like that. And then exactly how it goes.
How happened to Brad about the woman's girl? So, but while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him, showed him kindness, and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those who held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him. The Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. He had you thrown into prison, although it wasn't your fault or your own, and you might be angry or depressed or recluse. I mean, some people fall that way. What did I do? But Joseph didn't. As the scripture shows us, Joseph did neither of these, and the Lord showed the warden that Joseph was a great asset, and the warden used this asset to his benefit. So, when the Lord blesses you, he blesses those around you. It's not just, as the Lord says, the sack filled up, shaken, and not like a potato chips.
One of the things that when you read this and stuff like that, you can see the God's protection on him because, like Jerry said, he had every right to have him executed, and he didn't. But it's mainly because God was with him. God was protecting him. God was watching out for him. And, I think it's a comfort to know that, just as God was with Joseph protecting him, in that time he's with us protecting us through all the things that we do.
Well, even when Christ was born, an angel came and said, "Hey, you have to leave right now."
Mhm.
And God knows the plans, every plan that you even think or maybe considering tomorrow. He knows all of that, but you don't know any of the plans that He makes.
It's something we should find comfort in, knowing that there's nothing that God wants, God's will, God's design that's ever going to change, whenever you're walking with Him, because He's going to make sure that everything goes in alignment the way it should be.
When my dad was in the Navy, he was on a surface ship. He was a postman. And those guys usually the ones that come up the decks and stuff like that, fix the ships, whatever. They have different ranks now, but the captain was from, the CO was from Pittsburgh, and he was closest to Pittsburgh. So the CO sent him into the carpool to give him a Jeep and ship it on the move. He said, so all you had to do was keep an eye on the Jeep. He laid on the beach all day, waiting for the ship to come back in case the CO wanted to go somewhere. Yeah, it's rough. But he told me back then that he put in for a transfer from where he was at to another station, and he made the advancement. He said that back then that if you made an advancement, you put in a transfer, they'd take your advancement away and give you the transfer. Otherwise, he'd have been in need for that. But that's what it reminded me of when I saw it here. Blessings upon them. So, sometime later, the cupbearer, the royal cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. And after they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. Each dream had a meaning of itself. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, why do they look so sad today? He says, well, they both had dreams, but there is no one to interpret them. That must have been an incredible nightmare to have a dream so vividly and go, what does it mean? I mean, when I wake up, I don't ask somebody, well, I had a dream last night. What does it mean? You ate something before you went to bed. Stop doing it.
So when you remember the dream,
But maybe it was the fact that God gave prophecies to these men, and it stuck with them so well that they wanted an answer to it, but they couldn't figure it out. So then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, in my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches, soon it budded and blossomed, and its cluster ripened into grapes. The Pharaoh's cup was in his hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand. And Joseph said to them, this is what it means. 3 branches or 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness, and mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. Okay? That. Don't forget me. I did you a good favor, do me a good favor. He said, because I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in prison in a dungeon. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. And he says, this is what it means. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. He didn't say anything about remember me whenever this comes true, did he? No. So, on the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all of his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impelled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot. He's back. He's probably, and I wrote in here, he says, here we have Joseph. Tit for tat was the deal he required, and yet, after the chief cupbearer was returned to his position, and the chief baker was impelled, just as Joseph had given the interpretation to both of their dreams. Now, what I see in this is that the cupbearer was restored to his position, and the baker was killed. I see this as the cupbearer keeping his mouth shut, because he didn't want to be in the baker's position. Mouth shut, head up, eyes focused, don't cause waves. He probably figured, I'm back in my position. I don't want to be where the baker's at. So I don't want to be, asking anything. Some people say, well, I've got this position. I'm going to establish myself first, where I can figure myself irreplaceable before I start asking favors.
a good cupbearer also because they're the most important person Pharaoh's employed in the service, because they would taste the wine before they give it to the king, like Nehemiah.
Yeah.
Right? And so the one that doesn't kill me, he's going to kill you.
Well, I read into this, and I'm reading into some things was probably something not good thing to do, but you could have never really figured out what did the baker do. Maybe they were both, implicated in that crime, and when it came back, Pharaoh figured out, well, I don't have a good cupbearer. This guy's sitting in prison, so I'm going to put him back in his position. They were both guilty. He's having sitting in society. 2 people committed a crime, but the one guy spills his guts about everything, and he gets to walk, and the other guy gets hung. I'm not snitching. Well, you're going to do time. But when 2 full years passed, Pharaoh had a dream. So we had to wait till Pharaoh had a dream before this cupbearer had a chance to fulfill what he probably promised Joseph in prison. Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing in the Nile, and out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows, and Pharaoh woke up. I would have probably woke up too and seen cows eat cows. That would have been pretty amazing. But each of these dreams are very definitive and very focused on a specific thing. And they had the dreams, they remembered every aspect of them. I don't know how many dreams I've had. There's a movie, it's Don Watson, it's called The Incredible Mr. Lipton. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but in there he said that if you dream the same dream 3 times in a row, right, it becomes true. And he dreamt there was a fish. And after the 3rd time, he found the water became a fish. So I just had glasses on. Then he says he fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. And after them, 7 other heads of grain, sprouted thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads, and then Pharaoh woke up and it had been a dream. In the morning, his mind was troubled. He sent for all of the magicians and wise men of Egypt. That's kind of a contradictory term, you know. They ain't very wise. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Now, this is different from Nebuchadnezzar, right? He told him, he says, tell me what my dream was. And they were like, well, you tell me, he will interpret it for you, right? Well, here, he told them what the dream was, they couldn't, I don't know. Which is weird. I mean, the baker, chief baker, would be headed. You'd think they'd be like, oh, let me ponder this for a minute. I'll get back to you in a week or something. So then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, he says, today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. And now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. He told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. The things turned out exactly as he interpreted them for us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was in prison. So after 2 years, the Pharaoh had a dream, and of course the magicians couldn't help. It was only then that the cupbearer remembered his deal with Joseph, that came to the Pharaoh and told him, while I was in prison and with the baker, we had dreams, and served with the chief of the guard interpreted our dreams. And when he said came true, just as he said. That was a little add-on there that I had. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he was shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. So after 2 years or more, actually, I didn't say exactly how long he was in the dungeon. But I imagine he was a pretty scruffy young man. I don't know if he had a beard like they show Moses had in the 10 Commandments, but they were probably scrubbing him down like he was presentable for Pharaoh. I mean, I can only imagine when Moses and Aaron went before Pharaoh of Egypt. They were in shepherd's gear with staves and long beards, scruffy looking. And I imagine when they went to come in and see before Pharaoh, they probably like, you bad. You can't walk before Pharaoh like this. I mean, today, even today, they say, well, you're going before the king. You got to be presentable. You're going to beat the president. You got to be presentable. Which only in America, I see, where people go, screw him. I'll go the way I look. I don't care what he thinks. That's one of the great things about this country. But it doesn't specify down other than that he had to be shaved and changed his clothes. Pharaoh said, that was over that. So Pharaoh sent to Joseph for Joseph, he was quickly brought. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream. No one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that you can hear a dream and you can interpret it. He says, I can't do it. He said to Pharaoh, well, this has got to be a pretty rejected thing for Pharaoh here. This chief cupbearer stands up for you and says, you can do it. You know? And then you grow up before me and you tell me you can't do it. You know? He says, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. He says, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile. And out of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. And after them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all of the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before, and I woke up. He said, in my dreams I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing in a single stalk. And after them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin, and scorched by the east wind. Now, imagine that's, today we say, scorched by the summer sun. The east wind must have been pretty fierce. I know in Hawaii, they have, what do they call it, down off the Kolikoli Pass, they have the trade winds blow down through. At times they blow 35 miles an hour. Okay, that was where the Japanese came through the bomb Pearl Harbor. They came down through the water. It's called the Kolikoli Pass, it's through the mountain pass. And they've just got great arms on people's island. But he said those winds were 35 miles an hour, and at one point, if you leave your windows, louvers open, it'll blow your curtain straight out. So you don't need air conditioning, you still need window. Right? So I can only imagine how bad the east wind was in Egypt. When they refer to it, they were scorched, like as if they were in the east wind.
It's used in other replacement courses.
So it must have been like the trade winds. When they came through, it just flattened over the stalks. It was that strong and fierce. You'd have thought they'd planted some trees. Had at least like a window.
Isn't Egypt desert?
There's still trees.
Palm trees.
Still a tree. They have more than just palm trees in there. It's not all desert. Egypt has, lush farmlands and stuff like that. But
Every year the Nile is flooded. For soil. In fact, it was one of the ancient Greek spiritualists, Nessie Lamona, said that Egypt was the beneficiary of the Nile, the child of the Nile. Because the Nile didn't flood Egypt.
it's positioned, the country itself is in a position where it's beside the Nile River. They also have the Mediterranean Sea on the north side. I mean, the water itself doesn't have to really fertilize the land, but the storms and the rains that are pushed off of it do the same thing. But it isn't just desert. I mean, when you think about Egypt, you think desert, but they have desert dune wastelands, but they also have oasis of sorts. There are, it says there, said 7 lean, ugly cows came up before the. It says, then Joseph said to Pharaoh, he says, by the east wind, but the thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads, and told this to the magicians, and none of them could explain it to me. Satan doesn't have any answers. He only has speculations about falsehoods.
They were inquiring from the wrong God.
It says, then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. or 7 good cows are 7 years, and 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. And all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it so soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land and take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all of the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held reserved for the country, to be used during 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all of his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Now, when he says this, I imagine he's just saying the Spirit of his God, because there's no way that they knew God or heard of God, or let alone would cast away all of their 9 or 10 other, whatever it was, number it was, gods, to accept just one.
So there was a Pharaoh in the dream who abolished the pagan gods, who worshipped one God. It died after his reign. I think they murdered him, they poisoned him. Because that wipes out the priesthood. They're very powerful, they're wrong. But yeah, and multiplicity of gods.
Well, that seems about the correct way to do things today. Somebody's trying to make things, good and better, but they go against the ways of other people that are in a powerful position. They just find it easier to get rid of them. So the things go back the way they were negative.
Put the laws rising Newton, their ship. The body at rest tends to stay at rest. What do you do? Comfortable where I'm at?
Yep. And for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. All that from an apple. Who's the archer that shot it on?
Wouldn't tell.
So if William Tell would have been by, the apple would have hit him in the head and get us back to the tree.
Shut up, as the sun. He kept an extra arrow in the reel. And he said, "Why is the extra arrow?" He said, "That would work." She was having
Nah, they go down that. They do it. Since, the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man who is the Spirit of God?" And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all of this known to you, there is no one so discerning as wise as you." So he says, basically, so you came up with the plan, it's on you. Yep. And that's probably what he was really thinking. It don't work.
You're behind now.
Yep. Consider yourself a baker. It says, "You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." But it's amazing how God's blessing upon Joseph were like stepping stones. First, he was placed in what we discussed in the inheritor of the family. When he was given a coat of many colors, or arms of some cultures and countries did. Then, when he was sold into slavery, he did not lose sight of God and prospered in his life to become the leader of Potiphar's household after being falsely accused and thrown into prison. Again, not letting go, he was promoted to run the prison of the warden. From there, went on to see the Pharaoh, in which I got to say must have been a sight before, as I mentioned, that he was shaved and given proper clothing to see the Pharaoh. And when Joseph interpreted the dream, he also gave a solution to Pharaoh, not just an interpretation. And the Pharaoh was so impressed that he promoted Joseph to oversee the storing of the dream because, quite frankly, it was each time Joseph was placed in position, he never forgot that it was not him, and never did he forget that God was the reason he was there. And that's real quick. That's all I have. Actually, I went to close in about 40 minutes.
Wait a minute. The Pharaoh didn't believe in God's our God, right? So who did he think
Well,
gave Joseph all the information?
Common law. The head god in Egypt was wrong.
Right, so does he think Joseph is some kind of superior power or something?
The ancient people believed that gods were indigenous in certain areas. So if you're an Egyptian, your gods are in control of Egypt. I'm a Hebrew from Canaan, my god's in control of that land. But your God exists. So you'd say my God still exists, okay? Because you wouldn't say my God's more powerful than yours, but you recognize the existence of my God. And so you say, well, his God is, he excels in this area,
So they just think Joseph's God.
well,
exists.
if the God's speaking to Joseph, they don't want to upset him.
Right.
I mean, if he's giving Joseph the interpretation of the dreams, right, that might be another reason the Pharaoh put him in charge, because he doesn't want to upset any of the others. I mean, the others saw it as a benefit to themselves, for the same reason. Whatever God's blessing Joseph with whatever he does, if I upset him, if I do Joseph wrong, that God could come after me. So,
The ancient people had a hierarchy of gods. The cosmic gods are the greatest, they're the creators, they're in control of everything. We have lesser gods. If you read the book of Jonah, the guys on the ship, the sailors, their gods couldn't tell them what was wrong. And so they went to Jonah, his God tells them. Now, they're not going to deny their gods necessarily.
But they'll accept Joseph's God.
Well, yeah, as a cosmic god, okay? He's just one of many gods, and he's in control of this specific scene or incident or whatever. So, and as you said, don't take off a god, especially a cosmic god. The easiest, perhaps, scenario would be, if you're familiar with Greek mythology, you have Zeus, who's the top god, and you have Poseidon over the sea, Hades over hell, and then you have minor gods under.
Yeah, I tried reading that. It's confusing.
Well, the thing of it is, the three cosmic gods, or head gods, would be Zeus on top, then Poseidon, then hell. That covers the whole universe in Greek thought. Okay?
when Moses and Aaron went before Pharaoh, God brought on the plagues to fight each and every one of their so-called gods and show them that he was God, they were not.
Right.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us today to study your word. And be with Jerry as he brings the message. We ask this in Jesus' name. When you have 7 pages